This is A News. I'm Bakhtiar Sonova, and let's go through the main headlines. At least 5 people killed in Israeli strikes on southern Lebanon despite ceasefire. Cubans remain cautiously optimistic after lawmakers pass broad economic reforms. And Poland strips Volodymyr Zelensky of top honor over the Second World War dispute. Awards return in protest. To the Middle East now, a ceasefire between Israel and Hezbollah is facing an early test after new strikes were reported in southern Lebanon a day after smoke was seen over the border, shortly after the truce was due to begin.
On Friday, smoke rose over southern Lebanon after a US official said Israel and Hezbollah had agreed to a ceasefire. The truce was due to begin at 4 p.m. Lebanon time and was confirmed to Reuters by a senior Israeli official and 2 Hezbollah sources. But footage from northern Israel showed heavy smoke billowing across the border after the stated start time. Before the ceasefire was announced on Friday, residents were seen leaving parts of southern Lebanon as fighting intensified.
We left 3 days ago. It's been 3 days now, and now they started threatening. And the shelling is expanding and getting closer little by little. You know, we have families and children with us, and people get scared. So we want to make sure the children are safe, and God willing, we will return.
On Saturday, Lebanon's state news agency reported Israeli airstrikes and drone attacks in the south, saying at least 5 people were killed. It said Israeli warplanes and drones struck the Nabatea area overnight and into Saturday morning, while artillery fire hit Nabatea and its outskirts before dawn. Israel did not immediately comment on the Lebanese state media report. Earlier, the Israeli military said it had targeted Hezbollah operatives and infrastructure in response to repeated ceasefire violations. The army also said its forces could act against threats in Lebanon under ceasefire restrictions.
There are restrictions. We operate within those restrictions in accordance with the directives of the political leadership. Again, when it comes to removing threats, we are authorized to operate in any area and will continue to act to eliminate any threat that is identified against our forces or our residents.
Axios reported that US envoy Steve Witkoff and Iran's foreign minister Abbas Araghchi were heading to Switzerland for talks on turning this week's interim pact into a lasting regional deal. A halt to fighting in Lebanon is a condition for 60 days of US-Iran talks on Iran's nuclear program, regional security, and reopening the Strait of Hormuz. The interim deal calls for an end to military operations on all fronts, including Lebanon. But Israel says it is not party to the wider US-Iran agreement.
One of the world's most important shipping routes is returning to business after weeks of disruption. But while oil tankers are moving again through the Strait of Hormuz, new conditions imposed by Iran highlight just how fragile the situation remains.
Commercial shipping is picking up once again in the Strait of Hormuz after Iran and the United States signed an interim agreement aimed at easing tensions in the Gulf. Iran's Persian Gulf Strait Authority has introduced new transit procedures requiring vessels to submit passage requests at least 48 hours before arriving at the strategic waterway. During a 60-day negotiation period under the agreement, Iran says it will waive transit-related fees and cover security, safety and insurance costs associated with passage through the strait. The measures come after Iran's Supreme National Security Council ordered the expedited processing of transit requests following the signing of the Memorandum of Understanding between Tehran and Washington. Traffic through the strait has already begun to recover. Shipping data showed several oil tankers entering and exiting the waterway on Friday, including vessels carrying crude oil, petroleum products, and liquefied petroleum gas. US President Donald Trump welcomed the resumption of commercial traffic, saying oil tankers were once again moving through the strait, while warning that Iran has 60 days to reach a broader agreement with Washington or face further consequences.
And now we have an agreement that was signed last night, and it's 60 days. They have to make a deal, otherwise we will do things that won't make them happy, but I don't think it's going to get to that. I think it's going to be very good. Remember, if we do that, then all of a sudden you're not going to have the oil flowing out of the strait too quickly, because people that own billion-dollar ships don't love missiles flying over them, don't love mines all over the water.
While technical negotiations have been delayed, the broader 60-day agreement remains in place for now. The coming weeks are expected to test whether the ceasefire can develop into a more lasting arrangement between Washington and Tehran.
Now we examine the fragile ceasefire between Israel and Hezbollah, a truce that is already facing serious challenges amid reports of continued strikes in southern Lebanon. Meanwhile, shipping traffic through the Strait of Hormuz has begun to recover, offering cautious optimism for global energy markets, although flows remain well below pre-conflict levels. To discuss these developments and their wider geopolitical implications, we're joined by Daniela Mello, political scientist based in Lisbon, Portugal. Daniela, welcome and thank you very much for joining us. Daniela, how significant is the Israel-Hezbollah ceasefire, and what does it tell us about the current state of regional diplomacy? Also, reports indicate that strikes continued even after the ceasefire came into effect. Does this suggest the agreement is already at risk of collapse?
Well, this agreement is always at risk of collapsing. It's a fragile agreement, and all the parties involved agree that it's a fragile agreement. There does seem to be a great desire of Iran and the United States to move forward, but having said that, that doesn't mean that this agreement is not going to be faced with severe challenges, as it has already been during this week. And the announcement that the official signing in Switzerland would no longer take place, given the strikes between Israel and Hezbollah, is quite telling. Lebanon is, of course, one of the main points of friction right now in moving forward in the negotiations between the United States and Iran. And of course, when I say Lebanon, I say Israel. There's growing distrust between all of the actors, all of the main actors in this conflict. So if before we only had distrust between the United States and Israel versus Iran and vice versa, now we have distrust between Israel and the United States itself. So this week we saw the friction between the United States and Israel really come to a boil. We had incredible statements by the President of the United States and by the Vice President J.D. Vance, basically telling Bibi Netanyahu and his government to toe the line or else, and reminding the Israeli government that the United States is the only superpower that is truly on the side of Israel, and that Israel depends on the United States for much of its military aid. So it's an incredibly volatile and tense moment in which these different players now all have different incentives moving forward. And one of the main concerns by the intelligence services in the United States, this was revealed in an exclusive of the Washington Post yesterday, is that Netanyahu has every incentive in the world right now to continue to sabotage, for lack of a better word, but to hinder the negotiations going forward after this memorandum of understanding. So it's movable sands, it's movable waters as we speak about the relationship between this three key players. And having said that, I do return to my main point, though. The United States and Iran, in spite of the distrust, in spite of the tension and growing tension, do continue to signal that they want to reach some sort of peace and some sort of settlement to their conflict. So we are likely to see those actors still push through, no matter how many hiccups come in the coming weeks.
Daniela, turning to the Strait of Hormuz, shipping activity has begun to recover after a month of disruption. How important is this development for global energy markets now?
This is vital. This is vital. Any sort of movement in the direction of oil flowing again is likely to avoid the global economy from falling into a major crisis, if not a recession. President Trump has himself acknowledged that this is one of the main drivers of the wish of the United States to continue to move ahead with negotiations with Iran and try to find a solution to exit the region. In fact, when I say this, there were a couple of lines by President Trump this week that were particularly telling. Is that both President Pence and President Trump, and J.D. Vance, both of them, when talking about the situation with Iran and in talking about the need to come to the settlement of the memorandum of understanding, they always start with the economic factor, which, I mean, may seem like just a non-discursive choice, but it's not. That's what truly worries right now the American public, that is suffering and is showing at the polls that it blames President Trump and his administration for the economic suffering that the conflict in Iran has brought to the global economy, but to Americans specifically. And it also, like another thing that President Trump has said is multiple times this week, he mentioned that he didn't want to be like President Hoover. And when he makes that comparison, he's talking about the president that presided during a Great Depression, an economic meltdown of the financial system. So this is first and foremost in the mind of the president, both for internal domestic response to the pressure of the public and of his own party, but also because this is a president that is generally just very sensitive to the market and very sensitive to the global economy, and who does not want his legacy to be one of association with the global economic crisis.
Daniela Melo, thank you very much for your valuable insights and for joining us today. We greatly appreciate your time and expertise. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you. The Cuban parliament has approved measures aimed at expanding private sector participation and attracting investment across the economy. This comes as the island seeks to weather U.S. sanctions that have deepened its economic crisis.
Following a move by Cuban lawmakers to approve sweeping reforms that would privatize a large portion of the country's socialist economy, Havana residents have reacted with cautious optimism. The measures, backed by the Communist Party in a bid to withstand punishing U.S. sanctions, would open the door to private banking and real estate development, while allowing businesses to hire more than 100 employees for the first time. Some residents welcome the changes, while others express skepticism over whether they would be implemented.
We are at a moment when what we have is not working, and if new measures come, even if they are capitalist, but the population can improve, eat better and stay afloat, then the measures are welcome.
If you expand the private sector and collect taxes as they really should be collected, and don't create a commission of inspectors who will later fine them or take away their money, it means the measures are good, they are positive. I agree.
The 176 measures are aimed at further decentralizing Cuba's state-run economy, which has been left struggling by a tightened embargo under US President Donald Trump. Since January, Cuba has been under a harsh energy and financial embargo, effectively restricting access to fuel, its main energy source, and deepening a crisis that had already been worsening over the past 5 years. Under the island's current economic model, the government largely determines what is produced, the prices at which goods are sold, and how the country's resources are allocated. If implemented as approved, the measures would represent the most significant change to Cuba's socialist model since former leader Fidel Castro's 1959 revolution, and mark a major shift towards a market economy. In approving the reforms, Cuban authorities cautioned that implementation could be slow and noted that the measures may not be viable unless the United States lifts the energy and financial embargo on the island.
A fire at a beach resort in the Dominican Republic has killed one person and forced nearly 1,700 guests to evacuate. Authorities said the blaze broke out at a beach hotel in Bayahbe, killing a 46-year-old Italian national. 3 people were taken to medical facilities, while 6 others were treated at the scene, including guests, visitors, and emergency responders. The fire has since been brought under control, but investigators are still working to determine its cause. Guests were moved to nearby hotels. Western Europe is bracing for another spell of extreme heat with health warnings issued in several countries as temperatures climb well above seasonal averages. France has placed dozens of departments under orange heat alerts, with record temperatures possible in the coming days. In the UK, an amber heat warning covers parts of England and Wales, with temperatures near 34 degrees Celsius. Southern Spain could exceed 40 degrees Celsius, while Germany may reach the mid-30s before storms arrive. European Union leaders reiterated their support for Ukraine while discussing the prospects for future peace negotiations with Russia. European Council President Antonio Costa said the European Union doesn't see itself as a mediator in any potential talks, arguing that the bloc remains aligned with Kiev and that there are currently no credible signs Russia is ready to engage in serious negotiations. French President Emmanuel Macron, meanwhile, insisted that Europe must have a seat at the table whenever peace talks take place, saying any future settlement would directly affect the European security interests.
Our determination in supporting Ukraine and work towards a just and lasting peace. The European Union is not, and we do not intend to be mediators. The European Union is on Ukraine's side. We have been with Ukraine through the war, and we will be with Ukraine after the war.
Nous ne sommes pas des médiateurs. Nous sommes aux côtés de l'Ukraine.
We are not mediators. We stand with Ukraine. We are providing it with aid and support, and we have imposed sanctions on Russia. A second point, very simple and very clear, that we have always stood up for. When negotiations take place, Europeans must be at the table, because Europe's interests are at stake.
A diplomatic dispute is growing between Poland and Ukraine after Poland's president revoked a top state honor awarded to President Volodymyr Zelensky. Ukrainian officials have responded by returning Polish awards, prompting calls for calm from Prime Minister Donald Tusk.
Ukraine's top officials are hitting back at Poland after President Karol Nawrocki revoked a prestigious state honor awarded to President Volodymyr Zelensky. Several of them rejected Polish state honors in response to Warsaw's latest decision. Ukraine's Foreign Minister Andriy Sybiha was among the first to do so. He called the move a strategic mistake and said only Moscow would benefit from tensions between the two allies. Ukraine's military intelligence chief, Kyrylo Budanov, has rejected a Polish state award he received last year, while Ukraine's ambassador to Poland, Vasyl Bodnar, says he will return his award as well. The dispute began after Polish President Karol Nawrocki revoked the Order of the White Eagle, Poland's highest state honor, which had been awarded to President Volodymyr Zelensky. The decision followed outrage in Poland over Ukraine's move to rename an army unit after the Ukrainian Insurgent Army, or UPA.
The President of the Republic of Poland is the Grand Master of the Order of the White Eagle and has a duty to uphold the honor of this highest state decoration. This duty also rests with the chapter of the Order of the White Eagle. Therefore, in light of President Volodymyr Zelensky's consent to name one of the units of the armed forces of Ukraine Heroes of the UPA, and after consulting with the chapter, I have decided to revoke the Order of the White Eagle from the President of Ukraine.
Many Ukrainians view the UPA as a symbol of resistance against Soviet and Nazi forces and a key part of Ukraine's independence struggle. But Poland says the group was responsible for the Volhynia massacres during World War II, in which around 100,000 Poles were killed. Thousands of Ukrainians also died in retaliatory violence. Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk has urged both sides to lower tensions, warning that a conflict between Warsaw and Kiev would benefit Russian President Vladimir Putin and concern Ukraine's allies. Nawrocki has also raised concerns about Ukraine's future membership of the European Union, saying Poland must protect its farmers and agricultural sector while continuing to support Ukraine in its war against Russia.
Azerbaijan is expanding its diplomatic presence in Europe with the establishment of a new embassy in Portugal. President Ilham Aliyev has signed an order creating the diplomatic mission in Lisbon, while the Cabinet of Ministers has been tasked with arranging its funding and operational support. The Foreign Ministry will also finalize the embassy structure and staffing. The move is expected to strengthen political, economic and cultural ties between Azerbaijan and Portugal. Georgia's Prime Minister Irakli Kobakhidze is in Tajikistan on an official visit, a trip that brings together two countries with growing but still developing ties. The visit comes a month after the two sides held their first Deputy Foreign Minister-level consultations in Tbilisi, signaling a push to deepen the relationship. Our reporter Nini Nikolashvili reports.
Georgian Prime Minister Irakli Kobakhidze touched down in Tajik capital Dushanbe on Friday, where he was officially received at the airport by his counterpart, Prime Minister Kohir Rasulzoda. The Georgian delegation traveling with Kobakhidze reflects how broad the agenda is. It includes the ministers of foreign affairs, economy, agriculture, education and culture. The two countries have recently been focused on strengthening political dialogue, boosting trade and economic ties, and deepening cooperation in education and culture. Tajikistan has expressed clear interest in developing transport links with Georgia, and the two sides have already signed an agreement on international road transport. Georgia's position as a key transit corridor between Europe and Central Asia makes that connection strategically important for Dushanbe. Diplomatic relations between the two countries date back to 1994, but high-level visits of this kind remain rare, making Friday's meeting in Dushanbe a notable step forward in bilateral relations. Nini Nikolashvili, Tbilisi, A News.
Kazakhstan is looking south for new trade routes. Officials say the country is working on two transport corridors that could provide access to Pakistani seaports through Iran and Afghanistan, opening new links to markets across Asia and beyond. Our correspondent reports.
Kazakhstan is considering two routes to Pakistan's seaports, opening a potential gateway to markets across South Asia, Southeast Asia and East Africa. The first and preferred option goes through Iran, with goods transported to Iranian ports and then onwards to Karachi, according to Kazakhstan's first Deputy Prime Minister Serik Zhumangarin. However, while a railway connection exists between Iran and Pakistan, officials say the infrastructure remains insufficient for large-scale freight operations. A second route would use the Trans-Afghan corridor. If completed, it would allow cargo from Central Asia to reach Pakistan through Afghanistan and continue onto the Arabian Sea. The plans gained momentum after Iran confirmed its readiness to provide Kazakhstan with access to the port of Chabahar. Astana is also expected to gain a presence at Shahid Rajai, Iran's largest commercial port. In return, Kazakhstan says it's ready to consider providing Iran with terminal facilities and port capacity at Aktau and Kuruk on the Caspian Sea. For a country without direct access to the world's oceans, the development could significantly expand trade routes beyond Kazakhstan's traditional transport corridors. Fariza Kalimurzina, Almaty, A News.
This concludes our news update for the hour. Thank you for your time and stay tuned to A News for more updates.